Peace, what's up everybody? Thanks for coming back to the channel. In some time since I've been able to communicate with you guys. There's been a lot that's happened. We'll go over that for a little bit. We'll also go over what we're gonna do here with the bike today. Thanks again for coming back and all your support. Please remember to like, subscribe, share this with your friends. If you are in fact a new rider, you're gonna become a rider, you feel like you're just a novice rider, don't really know much, intermediate, know a little bit, and you also like to turn your own wrench, this is the place for you, because I am that guy as well. I'm not an expert on bikes, looking at them, telling you what type of bike is what, how to explain to you how engines work. I just know what my capabilities are, and if you can relate to that, then this is a channel for you. If you have any questions in terms of what's happening or where my level of understanding is, please feel free to ask them. I am not here to say I'm an expert on anything. I'm just sharing with you my experience along this journey. So it's been some time since we've actually made a video. And just to give you a little bit without going into a long story, back in November, I noticed that someone had tried to sabotage my bike. When I was leaving my home, it was hard to get the bike to move out of the garage. And I looked down and to the rear and noticed that my rear tire was flat. Put some air in the tire and it immediately went out. From that point, I spun the tire around and noticed that there was a razor blade in the crack of the tire. Now, there's not a crack in my tire, but there are these little cracks that are the design of the tire, and somebody had shoved a razor blade in there. Upon further inspection, I started to notice things like someone had tried to pull out the right side fairing to try and get in there. And then, after replacing the tires and going over the bike and making sure everything was okay, I went to leave one day and gas started leaking out. And it just so happened the gas line had popped off. There wouldn't have been a way for them to get their hand in, which means at some point, if I removed the tank, I didn't make sure that it was fully secured and snapped on, because there's a little snap after you put it on so that that hose doesn't come off. We got the tires replaced. We put everything back like it was. We made sure that the gas line was on the fuel tank the way it's supposed to, and we were working with it for a little while. When I went to the track, there was a gentleman that I told you about there who actually told me my suspension was off and that it needed to be reconnected because it wasn't threaded down all the way. Took the bike out to his location for him to do that. After coming back from his location and having him do what he did, I started to notice that there was oil leaking from my forks. This is something I had never seen before, and it did cause a lot of concern. So I called him up, told him what was going on, and I do remember him telling me, hey, listen, at some point you're probably gonna need to get new seals, if not new forks. New forks would have been really expensive, but new seals I could have done. So it's time to get new seals. In the interim of all of that happening and noticing the sabotage, the oil leak that came before that, fixing the tires, I also started to notice that every now and then I could feel this clicking under my left footrest. Naturally, I went to the chain, did some adjustments, made sure the chain was clean, went away for a little while, came back again, went away for a little while, came back again. And this time in doing the adjustment, spun the tire a little bit and noticed that it would stop at a certain point unless it was really physically pushed through, which meant I had a tight spot in my chain. We're riding around with two dangerous things going on, being that the oil is leaking out of the forks and there's a tight spot in the chain. You do not want that, because that means the chain is ready to snap, and that's not something you want to have happen. I was fortunate enough to have a job where I got off at 2 a.m. There's clear roads on the freeway and I could take off, and I definitely didn't want to be going fast. My chain snaps, because that's just way dangerous. And I also didn't want my suspension to give out in the front. So this weekend, tomorrow, all of these things will be addressed. One of the first things you want to be able to do inside this little toolbox, you're going to have different size pegs here based on the size of your chain. My chain is a 520 chain. So this particular chain requires me to use I believe it's 2mm peg. What you're gonna do is, inside this kit, you're gonna have a little spring like this. You're gonna put the spring inside here, You're gonna put the peg inside after the spring, and then what you're gonna do is tighten it back down, but what you want is you want this to barely be sticking out. You don't really want it to come out a lot. And that's where I made my mistake. I had it sticking out a whole lot, which was breaking this peg. So you're gonna have this sticking out just barely. I don't know if you can see that, but it's just barely sticking out. Once you got it barely sticking out a little bit, what you're gonna do is find your link in the chain, and with this particular part of the chain breaker, you're gonna put this on the back part of the link, on the back side of the chain, line that up with the link, and you're gonna tighten this down until it's flush with the chain and you feel like it's straight on with that link that you're about to pop out. This is a 14 millimeter socket, or excuse me, 14 millimeter wrench. So now I'm going to flush it down just a little bit more. So what I'm going to be doing first is I'm actually going to be removing the rear wheel. Now we want to remove this wheel for two reasons. One is because we want to put on the new sprocket, and two is because I'm actually going to be taking it to a guy that's going to be fixing the seals on my forks so that he could put a patch on the inside, because I recently had a screw about this long go into my tire, and the only thing I have that I've been riding around on for a few miles with is a plug that's in the back of the tire. So we want to make sure that it's patched from the inside, because this is a brand new tire, and that way we don't have any problems, any complications or blowouts from that particular hole, which is right here. So we're going to be taking this off first, and then once we get this off, we're going to remove the sprocket and put the new sprocket on, and then we're just going to let it sit off to the side so that we can actually get this patched from the inside, take it to the guy to get the front forks sealed up again so no oil leaks out. So let's go ahead and start removing this rear tire. Let's get this off. We got the rear tire off. Now what we want to do is remove the sprocket so that we can put the new sprocket on, and then I'll be taking off the front sprocket there. Now you notice I kind of put that jack under the tire a little bit just to give me a little bit of push to keep it even so I could pull out. But you can find anything, you know, piece of wood, something that's going to keep it up there at the even height, so that when you have to set it back in there, it's even and it's easier to push it through and or pull it out. But right now we're going to make sure we get the right ratchet here, and we're going to go ahead and remove these bolts, and we're going to put on the new one. Now listen, take your time with this stuff, okay? There's been dozens of times where I've been doing some type of mechanical replacement or repair and I've gone too fast. I've basically either made it take longer or it didn't actually repair what I was trying to repair. So you have to make sure you just take your time, especially with things like this. This particular sprocket's been on there for 5 years, so it's not just gonna pop right off when I pull it out, but you wanna make sure you just take your time. Have your little rubber mallet, pop it up from the bottom. You can see it's moving pretty freely now. Generally, when your sprockets are not good anymore, it's because these teeth on the sprockets are starting to round out. There's no longer a point. Now, I don't know how well you can see that, but you'll be able to notice that the height of the sprocket in the rear, the new one, is considerably more than the other one. Now, it's not bad. Mine really aren't that bad. The last time I actually did a change for sprockets was in 2019. And then I actually changed out to that chain in 2022. It's recommended that you do a sprocket and chain change at the same time, but depending on how on top of it you are, that's up to you. I would definitely recommend it if you're, riding really hard. Of course, have your bike on the track, but if you're barely a daily rider, you only take it out sometimes, you don't really put that many miles on it, you can take a look at your sprocket, make sure you gauge it well, and then just replace your chain. All in all, this is an okay sprocket. Since it's off and I got a new one, I'm not going to use it again. We'll take off the one in the front and we'll see how that one works. We're going to go ahead and put this one back on, or put the new one on, so we get this part of it out of the way. And again, this is a 42 tooth sprocket for the rear. And then in the front, we're going to be doing a 16 so that I have a more top speed as opposed to off the line acceleration. Totally up to you how you want to do it. If you do 16 in the front, that's more top speed. If you do 15, it's more off the line acceleration, less top speed. I don't really know much about the rear portion of it, but you can definitely look that up and see if there's 42, 44, I believe, maybe one higher, maybe something lower, and you can get the differences there by a simple Google search. We're going to be applying some red Loctite to this. I just got to dig that out of the crate. Now, when it comes to Loctite, a little bit goes a long way. And when you screw it down, it's going to go through the rest of the threads. We want to make sure that we give it a chance to sit evenly by doing it in this star pattern. 47 foot-pounds, 64 Newton meters. I actually do the foot-pounds on mine, so we're going to be putting this at 47. Rear wheel is done. Going to be taking this with us when we roll out tomorrow morning, so that we can get this patched from the inside. Just doing the gun on this side without having to remove the hose. If not, the hose gotta go too. That one's not gonna break it. Let's see if we can get it with the old Milwaukee. Make sure you put this in gear or it's just gonna be spinning and spinning. Let me use a little grease, a little WD-40 grease. This is actually 16 teeth, so that is actually the same size as the one that I have here. You can definitely see there is a significant difference in the height of the I guess the spokes or I don't know what you would call them, spikes or whatever, the height of the sprocket teeth. The teeth, that's it, sprocket teeth. I know I was forgetting something that I probably should have known. But there's definitely a difference here in that height. And this one's worn down quite a bit. That can cause some complications down the road, or maybe even some chain skipping here. Bring it over here to this camera so you can see a little bit better how that one in the front there seems to be a lot more rounded than the teeth of the one in the back, if you can see that. So yeah, definitely time for a change. I'm gonna get this one on and scrap this one. I'm not gonna do any grease because this definitely needs friction. That metal needs to expand and contact with the other metal. You put any grease on that, it's just gonna cause a spinning on the transmission here, and that means it's not gonna catch and not gonna give us what we want. So we definitely do not want any type of grease on that particular thing. Loctite on anything that you don't have to remove frequently. One little drop, and that should work its way through the rest of the threads. Not a lot. And we're gonna screw that back in place. All right, we'll hit it with the cobalt a little bit, see if it stops spinning. Oop, wrong way. There we go. All right, stop spinning with the cobalt. We'll look at the torque spec. So we got 2 bolts on top on the triple tree, 2 bolts on the neck of the forks, 2 bolts on the caliper, 2 bolts on each side on the axle bolts, and then the axle itself. Now again, we definitely recommend removing the calipers and the front tire first. That way, once you loosen up these bolts here on the neck, and then what's on the triple tree slides right out, and it's not an unexpected fall or anything like that when it comes to it. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Okay, so we got everything taken off. Both forks are off. Both forks are pretty dirty. I'm gonna leave them like this so we can see where they're leaking from. Also have these little O-ring clamps here on the top. I'm gonna leave them on there just so I don't lose those, and be sure to remind myself to mention that to him as well. And we'll come back tomorrow, put the forks back in after everything is done, and go for a ride, and hopefully nothing else is leaking out of the bottom of these things, because that's pretty dangerous. We got everything taken care of so far. The bike is completely ripped apart. We got the forks ready. We got the rear tire ready. We got the fork seals ready to go. We got the rear sprocket put on. We got the front sprocket put on. Everything is torqued down to spec. We've changed the oil. We've also flushed out the coolant and put in new coolant. So all we have to do tomorrow is take these parts off to be serviced, bring them back, put everything on, and hopefully sometime late evening, maybe early evening, we'll be able to take the bike out for a ride and see how she's working and see how she's performing, and make sure the forks aren't leaking anymore. The chain is good, and the rear tire performs up to spec, since it's gonna get a patch on the inside for that plug that's in the tire. Other than that, you guys stay with me. The third issue that we had was, I actually had, let me go get that real quick. I discovered one night leaving work this really long screw. I don't know if you can see that in my tire, right? So this was in the rear tire, all right? I'll slap a picture up so you're able to see that. So this was in the tire. I was able to plug the tire. I was able to keep tire pressure in it and ride around with it, but it was recommended, of course, to get it patched from the inside, which we've done. We brought it home. We let it sit with the glue for about 24 hours, and then I was able to pour water over it just to make sure no bubbles are coming out. It's held its PSI for at least 48 hours now, because I've had it back since Saturday. Hasn't been any issue with that. Tire's working great, chain's working great, front fork seals, everything is working great. No more leaks, everything is back to the way it should be. And then hopefully we're gonna do more track days than we did last year. You know, the bike is getting closer and closer to being tuned in to where not a lot should be happening with it. And if it does, I know exactly what it's gonna be. Everything is pretty much at a good starting point when it comes to that. Just stick with the channel. Until next time, thanks for coming back to Your Uncle at the Track. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to help keep this channel going so I can see the interest. We're working our way up to, right now we're at, I think, we're working our way up to 100 subscribers. Let's see if we can get to 100 subscribers, all right?